Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Walter Sweat, and I would like to welcome you to the latest edition of Walter's World, the podcast series from Astadia. For those of you who have attended before, you know that this is a podcast series really related to mainframe migration and modernization, where we bring in some of the industry heavyweights to help describe their experiences and their company's experiences and roles to help people who might be considering alternatives to the mainframe. And today I'm especially excited to have Andrew Wickett, who's the Vice President for Application Modernization to the Cloud for Micro Focus, join us. Andrew is one of the icons in the industry and well known by everyone. So Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today based on your very busy schedule.
My pleasure, Walter.
Thanks so much. Andrew, for those of the audience who may not know you yet, could you tell us a little bit about your time at Micro Focus and what your current role is and what you try to do there?
Yeah, thanks, Walter. I've been with Micro Focus as of next week, 15 years. I am now responsible a new adventure where we've split off our teams into an area called Application Modernization, the cloud, where we're focused on talking to primarily mainframe mid-range customers, basically anybody who's on a hardware platform, about moving that workload specifically to the cloud. So I run the North American team, and I've been given the privilege of this new venture. And let's just say that we're very, very busy talking to a lot of different people, partnering with people like Astadia on multiple projects. I think there's an renewed interest, and I was a partner and reseller just like Astadia. Let's just say we competed maybe 15 years ago occasionally. So similar in nature.
Industry, isn't it?
It really is. And I did that for about 10 years. So about 25 years experience moving workload to both a distributed platform and a cloud platform more lately.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. I just know that throughout the years, I've been told and have recognized you as, I mentioned, one of the icons, someone who truly knows what it takes to be successful in helping people move to these new platforms and now to the cloud. And Andrew, speaking of the cloud, I'd be interested to know if your experiences are like mine. Do you find today people who, as they consider alternatives, look for moving to on-prem or to the public cloud or to hybrid cloud? Has that changed over time for you and your experiences?
I think that the vast majority of our clients that we're talking to, new clients, existing clients, want to be in a position to be cloud ready, cloud enabled. They may or may not take the journey directly to the cloud and may move on-prem, or they're just not comfortable with moving their business and some of the data due to the sensitivity or the nature of that to a more public cloud, even though they're very, very secure and they have all the certifications. As an organization, I'll say they're not there yet, but they want to be able and enabled to do that when the organization has done it. But I'd say 80%-ish, maybe a little bit higher, are actually seriously moving workload to the cloud as a first step off a mainframe, mid-range, whatever that is. So still a good platform for a good option for both. We are seeing the cloud enabled or readiness. And we are also seeing people that want to be on a cloud, an on-prem cloud, either a private cloud or let's say an Azure stack or an AWS, in-house version of the cloud, as opposed to a, being part of, I'll say the more public cloud, even though it's not really public,
That makes sense. I know for me, it was funny 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when we were first working with people, if they were ready to do it, the answer was invariably, oh, heck no, I don't want to be first. Today, there's very few conversations where we have with new potential clients where they're not talking about the cloud in the first couple of sentences. So that can be a big, big difference. And I think it has been evolutionary. Andrew, for the critical workloads for organizations, I'd like to ask your opinion about what you think the best strategy is for moving those critical workloads to the cloud.
I mean, we strongly advocate doing a very detailed assessment up front. Look at it application by application from a technology perspective, from a business strategy perspective. Is this a core function? What's the strategy around that line of business that application is supporting? Or, and that might be multiple amount of shared data. Doing a really good understanding of the footprint and the company's desire to say modernize. And we strongly believe in what we call the mainframe maturity model, where it's a journey. And having a multiple option strategy is not a bad thing. We've done assessments for some very, very large companies, and application by application, is this something that you want to rehost? Is this something that there's a package? Is this something that should be, modernized completely to say a Java or something like that, using technology from Astadia, using technology from AWS, whatever that is, sort of application by application. So understanding that company strategy, what technology there is involved. Like, Walter, as you know, some of these mainframes are running some technology that's not supported. It's old. They don't want to maintain it. They can't find people to maintain it. So that also plays a factor in the technology roadmap. And that technology roadmap might be, let's get rid of this stuff and let's modernize it completely,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thinking about that, and as people consider alternatives, I'd be interested to know what you feel the lowest risk and the fastest path is for moving to the cloud based on your experiences.
Yeah, again, I obviously I work for Micro Focus, and we've seen clients use multiple strategies. The Micro Focus approach is more of a as is replatform. Let's get you in an elastic environment. Let's get you in a scalable environment, better DR, give you some better agile development tools, but leave the majority, if not all of the application as is. So since it's more of a lift and shift or a recompile and a replatform only, the less change is less risk and less testing and less everything. So that, a lot of clients say, let's get it over there, take advantage of that savings, take advantage of the new environment, and then start to go down that modernization journey. Sometimes that's not an option, but I believe it's the lowest risk to starting your journey. And, I've got clients that did this 10 years ago and are still running on-prem, on Micro Focus, and have no desire to do anything. Others have said, some of them have eliminated a lot of their batch. Some of them have created a whole bunch of web services. We had one insurance company that didn't have an online presence from a self-serve. But once they replatformed, they introduced a self-serve, where you could get a copy of your policy and get a copy of, all the information that customers were calling into the call center is now more self-serve, because the tools and the environment allowed them to do that. So, I think the less change, the less risk, the less time, the less effort, rehosting, using something like Micro Focus or any other type of lift and shift is usually the fastest.
It makes sense. You struck on something that I think is really important. Sometimes I feel that people want to change for change's sake, but they may have applications they haven't recompiled in the last 20 years, and they work wonderfully. So maybe it's better to just let them continue to do that and to strategically pick the things that they do want to change in a phase that gives them the most benefit.
Yeah, and partners like Astadia, right? They give you multiple options: rehost with Micro Focus, re-engineer, and that's the kind of thing we'd like to do. So we're not, we don't have multiple vendors. We can work with a partner that's strategic and can help with those multiple options. So that helps. I was with a client whose major organization, $8 billion annual sales organization, and was in love with Java and was going to convert everything to Java. But then when he realized that he was going to have to retrain his 2,000 customer service centers about a new front end and a new presentation layer, he went, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I'll get there, but maybe we should take a journey, as opposed to, that he says, I can't present that to the business. The CTO was like, I ain't going there, because I ain't gonna, I'm not gonna be happy. They're not gonna be happy with me. So
those are the things that people have to consider, aren't they? That you've got to look at the whole picture, not just trying to get somewhere quickly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Talking about that industry, are there any particular industries or types of customers that you're finding who are more interested today in moving to the cloud?
Um, I'd say it's evolving. We're talking to a lot of insurance companies that had books of business that they'd acquired, and they just wanted to run it on a lower cost platform. We've done some manufacturing. Major steel company moved everything from the systems that are running the plants all the way through the invoicing and delivery of the final product. A major supplier to car manufacturers. We're starting to see more government. Federal government uptick. We did a very successful project with you guys at Air Force, and we're starting to see a little more of DoDs getting involved, and so we're starting to see a little more federal stuff. So I think that's the uptick, but it's a industry agnostic solution that we are offering. More financial services are opening. They were the ones that were probably the most reluctant to talk about cloud, and they're starting to come to the table more and more now.
One of the things, I'm glad you mentioned them, one of the things we've seen with financial services, a lot of the brick and mortar type financial services organizations who are using technology that's been around for 30 or 40 years, as new companies have come in where they're not tied to that brick and mortar solution, they've perhaps been able to be more responsive. So leveraging some of the technologies that you talk about, where you can pick and choose where you can address the competition more quickly, has been really important for the financial tech customers that we at Astadia have worked with as well. So it sounds like we have similar experiences there.
I mean, definitely, Walter. I mean, there are people out there now competing with startups or newer companies that are 100% cloud-based. Yes. And they're companies running 20,000, 25,000 MIPS of mainframe workload, very happy, very successful, but their competition's running at something that costs 20 cents, compared to their.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, 80% lower cost base. It's hard to compete.
It truly is. I'm glad you mentioned that too. One of the things I wanted to talk about is, do you find, Andrew, that there's and I hate to use this word typical because we all know how hard that word is to define, but are there any typical savings or return on investment for the companies with whom you've worked after they've gone through these kinds of projects?
Yeah, we do. I'd say, conservatively, it's at least 60%. We've seen clients save up to 90% annually on their spend of their IT. The ROI is easily under 18 months. Sometimes it's under 12 months. That major steel company, they've been live for about a year now. And we the sales rep and I went out to meet with them, and we said, all right, so when we presented the ROI, you kind of smiled. Your CFO kind of smiled at us and went, sure, sure, sure. Now that you've been live for a year, what are you seeing? And the guy says, it's better. So he, in our presentation, in our ROI, in our sales pitch, we were comfortable, they were uncomfortable, and now it was actually better. So it's like, we got a ton of case studies, as you do, that clearly say that, plan on 75 and it might be better, but it ain't going to be much worse.
That's what we always try to say, somewhere 60 to 80, and it can even be better than 80. Boy, isn't it rewarding though, that proof in the pudding when you go back a year later and you get to see people actually see that benefit and be able to handle their business in different ways than they ever were able to before, just because of being able to utilize this technology, like with what Micro Focus brings.
Yeah, and they were acquired after the project, and the company that acquired them is like, how can you run your IT so much less than us? And I said, Chris, you got to introduce me, buddy.
I hope that he will do that. I get asked this question a lot, as I'm sure you do, and I know it's a tough one, but I'll throw it out there because I think it's important for our audience to be able to kind of, use your experiences to see what they could encounter. How long do these projects take? I mean, I know that's a wide-ranging question. And what are some of the key factors that come into play that help determine the duration of the projects?
Big question. I'd say that people have to understand that it's given a decent sized workload, a certain amount of code, obviously the amount of code, the amount of data, and if there are older technologies that need to be dealt with, like say assembler, or if somebody wants to get off of natural and database. We got a recent project where the customer says, I have a master agreement with Oracle. I want all my databases going to Oracle. So that's more work because they're not an Oracle shot today in this application. So I think it's good to say 10 months is maybe a minimum. It could be smaller if it's just a one-off application. We've had projects that have taken 18 months, some maybe a little bit longer. We worked together at a large auto parts distributor, and that was over a year. But they had a pretty complex environment. Is it phased, or is it one implementation? I think it's fair to say that if your mainframe contract's expiring in 6 months, we're probably not going to be able to help you, right? But if it's if you can extend it a year, in 18 months, we could roll up our sleeves and probably get something done.
I agree, and our experiences have been the same. I think the quickest project I ever saw was about 6 months, but it was 100% batch, and it was very straightforward. There were no ancillary products out there you had to worry about. To me, it's always the different types of technologies, as you talk about, converting COBOL and DB2 and VSAM and JCL.
That's
Boy,
easy stuff.
y'all are great at that. Perfect, wonderful tools. It's all the odd things that people put in there over the years that you've got to test and you've got to account for. And then ensuring the other components, everything else that runs on the mainframe, the job schedulers, the custom print handling, all of the security, it all comes into the package, and being able to do that mapping is important.
Yeah, it usually comes down to more testing, integration testing, making sure all that third-party software integration like schedulers, security, print, whatever they're using, it's not the COBOL and the VSAM and the JCL that are slowing down the timeline. It's usually more on the testing side.
Andrew, you talked about that we were kind of competitors at one point in time. For years, I worked for companies that we chased Micro Focus, and I was always envious because of the way your products, they just worked so well. You get to that core sweet spot, and it's amazing how easily that transitions from the mainframe to this new cloud environment, where you get that same level of performance and consistency and accuracy in what you've got. Y'all do a fantastic job.
It's evolved a lot, right? It's been 25 years where we've been moving at least development off the mainframe at Micro Focus, probably more like 30 years now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about some of the ancillary areas. What are some of the other biggest risk areas that you would always talk to people about? You need to think about this. For me, a lot of times I talk to someone who's never done a mainframe migration, and I think back to my first one in 1994 when I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And boy, did I make all kinds of mistakes back then. But hopefully I've learned over the years, as we all have. What are the things that you talk to people about risks that they need to consider?
That assessment up front discovers a lot about the technology. Sometimes, as you know, we get in there and they can't find stuff. They don't have the source code or whatever that is. We talk about, let's start if there's acquisitions that need to happen from an environment, you need to sign your contract with a cloud provider. You need to sign up for, say, job schedulers. Starting some of that as soon as possible, so the development or delivery team's not waiting for environments. Start thinking about test strategy early, planning for your test strategy. What do you want to test? Where do you want to focus your testing? You don't necessarily need to test everything because you're not changing everything, but what are the key things that we should be looking out for? Understanding that people have a day job, but this will impact, their day-to-day stuff, and they will have to be, subject matter experts will be needed. Planning for subject matter expertise involvement, making sure your operations team's involved early so that they know, what's going to change from a day-to-day running the application. Get your application developers involved early, because they're going to have a new tool set, and you don't want to throw it over the wall to them. You want get them involved. There will be a degree of change. Managing the change is a big part of it, and understanding what that is and communicating that. We did a large insurance company, and they actually assigned somebody as a change manager, and they put out newsletters, they informed the business, they kept people appraised of the timeline. They basically went across the whole organization and said, here's what we're doing, and here's the potential impact to you and where we need your help. So it was a really good way to make sure that the rest of the company, besides the guy who made the big decision and signed all the contracts, was aware. I think the communication and making sure everybody understands the roles and responsibilities. Oh, I thought you were going to do that. I thought you were going to do that. We've both been in this a long time, both Astadia and Micro Focus, and we've got a lot of expertise, and we refine it every time we do a project, because we always learn something.
Every time.
I think what's key is, listen to the experts, hire an expert. You're going to need, if you already have a partner that's doing your application development and your support, they're like a SME. They understand what you're doing. They may not know how to do a rehost. Bring in an expert to do a rehost and utilize them for their SME. And they're going to be the ones who are there at the end of the day when the project's over and you're running in the cloud, not me. And so they have a role to play, and it's a big role to play. So just making sure that everybody who's going to be impacted or could help out is aware. That's probably the biggest.
To success. I absolutely agree with you on that. Real quick, if you don't mind, talking about the cloud providers today, from your perspective, are there any benefits or differentiators that you feel between the major cloud providers that y'all work with?
Now I think you're trying to get me in trouble. You know what? We have a great relationship with the three major ones, Azure, AWS, and Google. Meet with them on a regular basis. They're the different go-to-market strategies. We are actually even seeing a bit of Oracle Cloud pop up. We've actually had a client ask us about Alibaba. So I'd say, if you're familiar with the cloud, you utilize a cloud provider today, I'll say stick with it. I mean, we've got a client that we're both working at that's got a diversified strategy. Some workloads going to one cloud provider, some workloads going to another cloud provider. I don't know if there's any real differentiators. Some of it comes down to, some people say that Google's better if you're data centric. Some people say that, if you got Teams and you got Office and you're a Microsoft shop, maybe you should look at Azure. A lot of people already have a lot of workload in AWS. I know some people that say, AWS is could be a competitor, so I can't really move my workload there because, they could be a competitor to my different lines of business. I think they're all very, very good. If somebody said, what are you doing today? I'd say AWS, from a customer workload point of view, has the lead from a number of customers we're working with, but it doesn't mean that the other cloud providers are that far behind. If it's a very close race, and a lot of it's customer driven. We don't get often asked that question by a customer and said, what cloud should I pick? It's more they've already have a strategy and they already have contracts. I mean, we've even seen clients that said, I've already committed 10,000 mainframe MIPS to this cloud provider. Now help me get there.
We've seen the same. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, people would ask us more, do you have someone that you think is the best horse in the race? Now it's like they, as you say, they already have an affiliation, an association with a cloud provider. And we feel the same as you. They all provide great performance. They have the certifications, they have the security. It's like anything else. You just have to maintain the environments correctly. But they all have been very successful in being able to prove that you can run mainframe workload in the cloud amongst all the providers.
Yeah.
One question that I'm often asked is, and you talked about this before, the development teams who are in place, who are having to learn a new paradigm of how that they work. Do you hear like people taking COBOL and staying in COBOL when they move to the new environment? Is it a challenging transition for them? Do they find that 6 months later they would never want to go back? What are some of the experiences that people have been able to share with you, if you don't mind me asking?
No, it's a great question. Again, we like to involve them early, because there's continuing to do changes on the mainframe to these applications in most cases. We like to say, let's get you involved and that change also has to go forward in the new environment. So we try and engage them in that process of, you had to change it on the mainframe, it had to go live. Now we've got this project that's running in parallel. Let's make that change in that environment using the new tooling, and let's get you starting to utilize that. We've seen more and more clients say, let's use your development products, enterprise developer, and use them almost from the time of acquisition at the kickoff, and because those tools can also let you put that code back on the mainframe. So let's start getting the productivity, using Eclipse or Visual Studio and the new tools, and learning on the job, even if the code is going to go back in the mainframe in the short term. That one of a very large insurance company, actually based in Canada, said they'd do a case study. We did a case study, so we started an interviewing person, and John, who runs development, I said, okay, John, I need a quote for this case study. What do you think? And he went on and on about the developer productivity, the new developer environment. I'm like, well, that's really good, but I was kind of talking about the rehost, and all he went on about. So we ended up using his quotes in the case study, and it was all around how his developers love it, and the productivity, and the tools are better. It's easier to attract talent, because you are using a more modern IDE, and you're using, I think they're using Git and Bitbucket for their source code repository, and they were using Jira, so more of those familiar tools to maybe new recruits and new employees. So it was kind of interesting. It was like, okay, that's great, John, but what about the new production environment running, so John's quoted in the development productivity and the love of those tools.
How fun that he got to see that benefit and that his developers really loved working with it. I don't know about you, 1,000 years ago, I used to have these shelves full of CICS books and JCL books, and that was my world. I only knew what was there. Once I found this new environment where you can just go find code snippets that you can use, and it's just a different way to work. And I'm always really excited when I see people really start to enjoy to do that.
Yeah, I think people of our grayness have that experience of that rack. I worked for a large bank as a COBOL programmer for 10 years. And, we had these racks of manuals that you had to go look stuff up on. And then, I was pleased when I got a 3278 color screen as opposed to a, black.
Yep. We share some common experiences. Andrew, one last question I'd like to ask, and I think this is an important one because people are faced with this. And I think as we are talking to different size organizations, this comes into play. I'd be interested to know your perspective as to if the companies to whom you speak are more interested in a big bang conversion or a phased conversion as they look for alternatives to the mainframe.
I'd say the vast majority of the clients we've worked with in the past 3, 4, 5 years have looked at a one phased. I don't like to say big bang because hopefully it's not a bang, but more of a, let's just get it all over there. That way we don't have to do any temporary bridges or interfaces or shared data. But some of these clients now are bigger and bigger. There's one large healthcare provider, insurance provider, they got 20,000 MIPS and 128 applications. We are not going to do that in one phase. Now we got to figure out what's shared data, what's read only, what's update only. So we got to figure out a way to phase that in. And I think as the workloads get bigger, the customers are maybe a little more conservative. We're starting to see more and more phased. We're being asked for that kind of, if I went phased, how would we pick the applications? How would we handle, the transition period if there's data that's shared? So, what those strategies look like is becoming up more and more. So I think we're moving from very manageable one phase projects to very large multi-phase projects. So you just have to plan it very correctly. And again, come back to that assessment. If you understand the environment, then the phases kind of fall out of it. You know what I mean? It's pretty obvious in the end what that should look like. And there might be some temporary stuff, right, Walter? I mean, there might be some temporary stuff and some, data capture stuff you have to build into it so that everything stays in sync, or shared data, or you're pointing to a database on the mainframe, or you're pointing to a database that's already been moved. So well planned out, both are very feasible.
Something that you mentioned before that I want to bring back here, because I think this is really important. We're seeing the exact same thing. It used to be all big, I hate to use that word bang as well, but now we are seeing with the larger organizations where they do need to phase it in. The point that you made before, that many organizations have a service group who maintains their environment today, and they know how to work with it perfectly. But it's knowing how to do that migration that's key. So
Yeah.
working with a company like Micro Focus, who understands what these projects really entail, I think is really important for people to consider as they look at those alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, we're great with you guys. You know, we're involved hand in hand, right? You might be doing 80 or 90% of the work, but we got one of our team on a part-time or full-time basis just to help supplement that execution so that the customer is successful, right? So again, and we often do leverage an SI that's already the incumbent, but just because they're the subject matter expert, and a lot of these organizations have already outsourced a lot of their work to these organizations.
Absolutely.
So they have a role to play. We're doing a large one now, and they're doing all the testing, but they're working with other people to do the actual, I'll say, lift and shift. But all of the testing, they know it better than anybody else, and that's a great role for them.
Alternative for them there, absolutely. Well, Andrew, I think we've about come to the end of our time. Any last words of wisdom that you would like to share with folks about, is this a viable option, or the things that you need to look for? What are the things that you would recommend to people to really consider?
I'd say, the assessment, the initial review. What do you got? Questionnaire. Let's understand a little bit about what you have, and share what case studies are. I don't think, Walter, that either of us have seen a workload we couldn't handle. Some are higher risk than others, but and some might be a higher cost than others. But I mean, I'd say the only one that really, really scared me was, 100% assembler, and it was an assembler that generated assembler. So, that kind of, puts you on pause of what's the best strategy, and
Yep.
and maybe that's an opportunity for some re-engineering and redevelopment, as opposed to a lift and shift, because you don't want to. There's no way to really handle that any other way. But I think it's start the conversation, start the discovery, bring in Astadia, Micro Focus, both of us, and let's share what we've done with other people, and make sure that you're informed on before you make any decisions, or before you start down any paths of looking for packages or something like that. Get another perspective.
Absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense. Well, Andrew, thank you so very much again for taking the time out of your very busy day. I found this to be just a wonderful conversation, and I hope that everybody in the audience enjoyed it as well. Please feel free to reach out to Andrew at Micro Focus, or to Astadia, www.astadia.com. And I hope that you'll be joining us for our future podcasts as well. Andrew, thanks again very much. It was great to talk with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. Always a pleasure.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.